Take a breath. Take a breath.
I just love it when you give people a theme and they write you a song. Isn't that awesome? Whew. Thank you. We all could remember that, right? Take a breath. How many people in here need to remember that? Woo! You know, there's a lot going on, as I said at the very beginning. There's a lot going on within this community personally. There's a lot going on within this community, in terms of sort of the global, national experience, which I don't know about you, but it's been challenging for me as a queer woman married to an immigrant. I don't think I need to say much more about that, right? So I always come back to our practices, right? Like, what do I do? What do I do when I'm feeling angry and frustrated and bitter and annoyed? And have anybody in here been feeling that lately too? You know, they're quote unquote not very spiritual emotions, but they're real emotions, and we don't ever deny our emotions in Unity. We say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. What do I do with this? I don't ignore it, but I say, what is it? What is it? What can happen because of this? And for me, I keep coming back to our values. I keep coming back to, what does it mean? What does it really, really mean to live into our values? And I see what's happening in the world right now as this challenge, opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to grow into that living expression of our values even more. Because clearly the world needs more. So we are being called to something. And so I've talked about how spirituality is what provides us with guiding principles and values, right? It's our spiritual life that gives us these principles and these values that inform our sense of right and wrong, and they are what influence our actions and the decisions that we make in life. And I will sometimes hear people, it's interesting, I'm hearing less of it now, but I will hear people say, well, we're spiritual, so we can't be political. And what I'm really going to hammer home is that I am not talking about politics. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. I am talking about human dignity. That is what I'm talking about. And it doesn't matter what your politics are. I am saying, do you align with those values of human dignity? So, can you feel how we become even more important in this time? In a world of increasing fear and mistrust, we're called to show up as radical love. We're called to show up as courageous presence. And I know that it kind of feels a little outside the box because our spirituality brings us this beautiful centered space inside of ourselves. But that is what we are being called to now bring out into the world more fully and more powerfully. I almost think to myself, it's like, wow, how selfish have I been? That I'm holding this within me, and it supports me, and it's fabulous for me, and I share it with all of you, but there's a bigger, wider space that we can all be sharing our understanding of truth from. Because spirituality is not passive. It may often show up as conflict avoidant, but it's not passive, right? It's not passive. And we are called to be the light in the darkness. That is what we are called to be. So everyone take a little sidestep with me. You know how sometimes I go sideways and then I'm going to come back around, right? So the World Happiness Rankings came out for 2025. And the US fell again in its rankings. We are behind the Czech Republic, Slovenia, the United Arab Emirates, Lithuania, Croatia. I mean, we are like, take a breath, everyone, when we look at this list. So what is it that creates this happiness index? And countries where more people donate, volunteer, and help strangers are happier countries. However, how kind we think our communities are matter twice as much to our happiness. Believing we can trust those around us to treat us well has a significant impact on our well-being. Okay, maybe you can see where I'm going now, right? Even though it felt like we were going sideways. When we see people as being fair and helpful, it allows us and them to be more resilient, right? We're more resilient to the stress. We're more resilient to loss and to grief and to the things that might be going on in our lives. And what the research has shown is that a kinder society actually benefits the people who are struggling the most. Now, I want to be real clear. Has anybody in here not had one of these stressors? Unemployment, divorce, health issues, discrimination, unsafe. I mean, when we talk about creating a kinder community, we're actually talking about a way for us to actually be healthier, a way for us to improve our well-being, a way for us to improve our mental health. I mean, this is why we come together in spiritual community, yes? So that we have a place where we can trust. So my question becomes, what happens when the institutions established to ensure our well-being are no longer trustworthy? And that's where I believe we are right now. So immigration laws, you can't count on them. They're changing them moment by moment by moment. They revoked the green cards of Stanford and UC Berkeley students just on Friday. Just revoked their green cards, deporting them, sending them home, right? Anti-discrimination laws. They are legitimately trying to bring back segregation, right? The possibility of segregation. The Supreme Court rulings. It used to be that when the Supreme Court made a ruling, they made a ruling. We can't trust even the Supreme Court rulings anymore because they're overturning their own rulings. Gerrymandering. Can you feel how this is not political? Gerrymandering is on every side of the fence. Have you ever seen a district map? When you look at them, they are ridiculous. They carve out streets so that they can keep neighborhoods that are going to vote more for one party or for another party. So what we've lost is our ability to come together and collaborate because all of our districts are designed to just be one perspective. So there's no place for us to be able to meet in the middle. Campaign finance laws. You hear a lot of people say that has been the point where something really shifted, where those PACs, man, you can pour millions of dollars. Look what happened in Wisconsin. Right? The most expensive think of all that money. What could that money have been used for? Right? What could that money have been used for? Social Security seems to have some tenuousness. Medicare seems to have some tenuousness now. Environmental protections are being, so can you feel how there is all of these things, all of these are all of a sudden there's an instability happening that is eroding our ability to trust. So what do we do? Do we just give in to that? Do we just give in to that? I mean, it's hard though, because they've done research and they've shown that what happens when people are brought up against this kind of injustice is two things kick in. Something called pseudo-inefficiency, meaning because it's not real, but we think it's real. And because we're bitter and we're angry, and because it feels so big, that we don't think we can intervene in ways that actually make a real difference. And then what grows from that pseudo-inefficiency is what they call psychic numbing. Anybody in here been feeling a little bit of that? And it's where we become indifferent to injustice. And it's to keep the despair at bay, right? We mentally distance ourselves from what's happening. Anybody in here relate to that? So what do we do? Because the pseudo-inefficiency, it's called pseudo-inefficacy, right? It's not real. We just think it is. You know, one of the latest research has shown that the biggest obstacle to people doing anything about climate change is the fact that climate change is happening. Because it's kicking in pseudo-inefficacy. We don't think we can do anything. The problem's too big. I can't personally do anything. And then it's kicking in psychic numbing, and we become indifferent to it. It's crazy, isn't it? How our brains are sort of wired. So that's what spirituality does. It kind of overcomes what might perhaps be an instinctive or an intuitive human survival mechanism. We use our spiritual practices to help us align with something different. And so, one, keep your focus on a more human scale. Focus on the stories, focus on the individuals, focus on the things that feel as if it connects to your heart, and that you actually start to not feel as if you can't do anything. Because if it's one person, can you do something? Yes, right? They say that when all of that slaughtering, all those people who were dying in Syria, right? Hundreds of thousands of people, and there was no movement because as a culture, we all felt so overwhelmed. And then that one picture came out. You know what picture I mean, too? That little boy, the little baby. And all of a sudden, everyone woke up. They got more donations and more support because of that one picture. 55 times more than anything that had come in prior to that. Because we got caught up in the story of that one individual. So we need to focus on the human scale. We need to look for really concrete ways to offer support. Not like up here, like, oh, I wish I could do something. We have to be activated to look for things. And then we have to share that with other people. We have to say, hey, did you hear that story about that? Did you see that picture of that little boy? Here's an organization that I know is doing great work there, right? Do you want to come with me to volunteer? We're putting a clothing drive together, right? You need to be vocal. And then we need to partner, right? We need to find other like-minded organizations. And what they have shown in the research is that when you are with like-minded people and partnering with other organizations, what happens is we don't feel that pseudo-inefficacy anymore. We feel energized. We feel as if we're accomplishing something. We don't feel as overwhelmed. Can you feel why? So there's a regenerative loop that we can put ourselves into that will allow us to support and to navigate these times. Research shows that when you stand up, that standing up for what's right is socially contagious. I loved that. Right? It's socially contagious. That one person in a group calling out injustice allows other people to follow suit. So what can we as a community do to live into our values? Knowing all of this, right? Knowing that our mistrust is alive and well. Knowing that we're struggling with feeling as if there's nothing that we can do. Knowing that we're starting to get numbed out because it just feels so overwhelming. All right. So the first step, and I'm doing this because everyone keeps coming to me and saying, I don't know what to do. Okay, well, I'm going to give you a bunch of things to do. How does that sound? All right, so first off, as a community, we need to embody radical welcome, right? Radical welcome. We need to go beyond tolerance. We need to go to the deepest level of belonging that's possible. And we need to not just do that in our hearts, we need to act on it in time and in space. So that can mean creating sanctuary, right? Which can be a spiritual sanctuary, but it can also be a physical sanctuary, right? A physical place where people know they can come and they are safe here. So maybe we're also hosting, trans-affirming spaces or immigrant rights events or mental health support groups. All of these things are supportive, right? And create a space of safety for other people. And we need to be open to have those courageous conversations. We need to be open to have those conversations because there is no other, whoever you think is over there on the other side, we need to find ways to have those conversations grounded in our principle, grounded in love, and it asks us to listen. Really listen. To try to see, because all of this is motivated by fear, right? All of this is motivated by fear. So love is always going to be the antidote to fear. Always. More fear just does what? Create more fear. More hate just creates more hate. We need to anchor ourselves in love. So we can also be a place for truth-telling and informed action. Here I am right now doing some truth-telling. Offer classes, we can host forums, we can have community events that are linked to, remember, we're a 501c3, so we cannot do anything that's politically aligned with a specific party. But that does not mean that we cannot have a voice on issues. Does that make sense to everyone? So we can host things about voting rights, about climate justice, about immigration. We can have things that are historical. There is so much history that is being lost. The one that really got me, so you know how they're removing words from the websites and all of that, right? I shared that 2 weeks ago. So on the Stonewall Memorial Monument site, they were no longer allowed to say trans. So it now says LGB fought for their rights, right? LGB. Now, maybe you don't know the history, but it was the colored trans community that was at Stonewall. It was not LGB, it was trans, it was queer people. It was the most marginalized people in our community that actually launched Stonewall. They are being erased from history. So we need to hold classes that educate people. Do you know that they did a study that showed that most Americans think that the population in America that is trans is 25%? Wouldn't that be a fabulous world, though, right? It would be wild, but trans community makes up between 0.6 and 1.5% of the population. People think it's 25% of the population. There is so much miseducation out there. So we can be a place where we are addressing those kinds of things. And then a place where also things can be shared. Where are the marches happening? Where are the letter writing happening? Where are the forums happening? Where else are things going on? And then this is, I think, the most important part. We have to form deep local partnerships. We have to partner with grassroots organizations, with other progressive churches. I was sharing with Chris, there's a progressive Christian organization that is very vocal, and Unity, we're part of it, that is very vocal about not letting the nationalist Christian right take over the identity, right? The identity. And they sent out signs that were like, trans rights are, Christian beliefs. And I was like, wow, right? There are other organizations who are doing incredible work that we can actually tap into. We have to give time, energy, resources to the groups that have been on the front line and continue to be on the front line. And then we need to be in right relationship with them. So we're not there to take over. We're there to be in service. We're there to be humble. We're there to be supportive. We're there to listen. What do they need, not what we think they need? Does that make sense to everyone? And I loved this. So I read a quote 2 weeks ago about the prophetic voice of spirituality, right? And when you think about the prophets, what the prophets were doing was calling out injustice. That's what they were doing in Scripture. And so we need to be prophetic, not just pastoral. So we need to speak out lovingly, boldly against injustice. We need to name harm even when it's uncomfortable. My mom was standing outside. Some speaker was coming to speak in her village in Florida, and my mom was there with her little signs, and my brother freaked out. Like, I don't want you to go. And my mom was like, oh no, I'm going. Right? He was afraid she wasn't going to be safe. Now, she was, right? But we have to overcome that kind of inner resistance within ourselves. We need to create supportive rituals for the time. We could be holding vigils. We could be present as a prayer presence to witness things that are happening publicly at hearings or things that are going on in the world. We can hold rituals to allow people to grieve. And then it all asks us to deepen our spiritual practice, because that's what's going to equip us for the sustained action and not just political reaction. We need to be in this for a sustained amount of time. So, joy, rest, and resilience. And I honestly think this, I saved it for last, because I really think this is something that we are particularly poised to be able to provide. Joy is an act of resistance. Just breathe that in for a minute, because it's all about the anger and the bitterness, and joy is an act of resistance. Music, art, dance, celebration, storytelling, all of those things, they nourish us, and they support justice and healing. We have to honor the sacred need for rest, for the Sabbath. And then we got to come together ourselves for grief circles, for spiritual care, for community healing. When I get back at the end of May, we have our annual memorial ritual, which is an opportunity for us as a community to grieve together. It's an opportunity for us to plant something and to bury something and to then see it come to life again later on. But we get to step into that communal grief together. Now, can I do all of that on my own? No. Okay, can I do all of that on my own? Yeah, no, there's no way, right? There's no way. This needs to be a community undertaking. This needs to be something that the community is in agreement about. This needs to be something that the community says, yes, we're going to come together, we're going to focus our energies, and we're going to be clear and specific about it. We're not going to scatter. We're not going to do 75,000 bazillion things. We're going to try to get some clarity around what it is that really speaks to the community. So some simpler things that came up, right? Number one, Cindy Acker is going to be leading a book study written by Martin Luther King III, which is about what is my legacy. This is an opportunity for you to educate yourself about something so that you can then take that out into the world and share the information that you have. So you can sign up for her book study. It's going to be on Sundays after service. So if you come to service and just stick around, you can come and participate. One of the thoughts I had was creating a Circle of Compassion prayer group that is just focused on current events. That's it. That's what they focus on. They hold the prayer consciousness for things that are happening in real time in this world. Cindy and I, so the choir is part of a community justice group of choirs already, right? Through Glide Memorial, the choir is part of a group that when called, when tapped, will be invited to just show up for various social justice purposes. Nothing's happened yet. So I was texting Cindy last night and I was like, can we just do something right now with us? Can we just do something? Because music, think about the power of music to uplift, to bring joy. And it doesn't matter if you can't sing. It's not about that, right? It's not about how good we sound. It's about just coming together. And I've shared with you how I marched in one of the first major, it was the second major gay march. This was before it was a parade. This was back when it was still, a protest march. And they always allow alternate voices to be present at those things. And there was a group of people with their signs, God hates you, Jesus hates you, you're evil, you're gonna burn in hell. And they have their little bullhorns and they're shouting this out as I'm walking through. And it was hard. You gotta go back to the 80s too. It was hard. And all of a sudden, because I wasn't, you know me, I kind of go my own way, so I was just sort of wandering through the protest. I didn't kind of stay in one place. And as I wandered through, all of a sudden I wandered right into the middle of the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir. Yeah. And as those people were screaming their hatred, the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir started singing Amazing Grace. And it was transformative. It was, all of a sudden, I felt safe. I was like cocooned in this sound that was about love and possibility, that wasn't about hate. And literally what happened for me is that the people out there kind of went into slow motion. They were like, I couldn't hear a word they were saying. And all I could hear was this song. And I wasn't identifying myself as a spiritual person at that time necessarily, and I joined right in. Because it was about lifting us up. And nothing, I can't imagine anything being a greater antidote to that hate than that community coming together and saying, oh, no. That's not what we believe. That's not what we stand for. This is not saying you're wrong, not getting reactive, but standing there and saying, this is what we stand for, and singing that out. So one of my thoughts was creating some sort of a community justice choir that we open up to all of Marin, anybody who wants to come. It would be like once a month, every month we'd all learn a song together. It would be simple enough. We'd have, you've seen them on YouTube, right? Where all these groups come together and then they just start singing, right? And we'd slowly be building a repertoire so that when there is something, we can show up and be anchored in our values, right? Be anchored in what we believe. And if you're freaking out because you can't sing, you can be a sign holder, you can help turn music, there's all different ways that you can still be a part of this idea, yeah? Okay? Don't come up with excuses. And then you need to tell me, what are some potential partnerships? Who do you know? What organizations do you already have connections with? Who is interested in creating collaborative projects? Who is in need? Who has something that's already running that could use some of our sweat equity? And I do mean sweat equity. I'm not just talking about giving money. Everybody understand that? We need to show up. And I know on some level we're all friggin' tired. I do know that. I have been fighting for social justice issues since I was 16 years old. I am tired, but I'm not going to go to sleep. Not going to go to sleep. Not going to sleep because it's too important. And this isn't about me, really. You know, this is really about the generation 2050. I do not want that generation to have to go through what I went through. I don't want to have them refight the same battles that I fought. I want them to be able to fight bigger battles, because we're not done, right? It's not as if my generation solved everything. There's so much work to do. I want them to focus on what comes next. The last thing I want to say, Chris is looking at me going, brevity, brevity. I was reading, I love historical fiction, particularly murder mystery historical fiction. Okay, take of that what you will. The whodunits, right? And I was reading a historical fiction book, and it focused on the suffragists. And it focused on a specific incident that was real. Did anybody in here know that being called a suffragette was an insult? Yeah. I didn't know that. Being called a suffragette was an insult. They were suffragists, right? I love that. That just I was like, oh, it's like being called an actress rather than actor, right? It's like all the ways that people try to add the little things on there to make it seem more demeaning or not important or, So these women were, all they were doing was marching in front of the White House. They weren't even yelling. They were just marching and they kept getting arrested and they kept coming back. And so they finally got fed up, and they arrested them all. And instead of sending them to the local jail, which was their jurisdiction, they sent them to a workhouse in Virginia. And they did not treat them like political prisoners. They treated them like they were in the workhouse. And these women were starved, beaten. And people are frantically trying to find them because nobody knows where they went, because they weren't where they were supposed to be. And the deputies and anybody who could help them have all been told to hide so that nobody can present a habeas corpus and nothing can be done legally, because everyone is working to teach these women a lesson. And they went on a hunger strike because they figured we're not really eating anything anyway, so they went on a hunger strike. And then when they realized that the hunger strike was seriously, some of these women were very close to dying from the hunger strike, they came to them and said, as long as you'll eat, we'll let you out in a week. And the women realized they want us to look better before we got out there. And they refused. And they continued their hunger strike. And they were carried in on stretchers, some of the women, when they finally got a court appearance. These were upper middle class women. That's who the suffragists were, because they were the ones who had the time and the energy and the resources. They were all upper class. They were the Astors. And they were putting themselves in that type of situation because they believed so fiercely in women's rights, in equality. I was almost kind of ashamed when I read that book, right? How many of us would be willing to go on a hunger strike, be force-fed with tubes being stuck down our throats, tearing open our esophagus? Right? The tenacity, the commitment. This is what we need to inspire ourselves with. This is why history is important. This is why knowing what it took to create this space for us to step into something new is so important. They used their privilege They worked every network they had. Every male in their, anybody who was a man in their orbit, they were working them to get women's equal rights. And they never stopped. And they didn't do it for themselves. They did it for their daughters. They did it for the women who could not come out because they were too busy working and trying to raise kids. That's who they did it for. That's what I want us to step into, because that's our legacy. That is our legacy. That kind of stamina, that kind of commitment. And yeah, I know it's scary. Don't get me wrong. I'm like, wow. But if we come together, we can create something. And does it necessarily mean that we have to go to that extreme? I'm not sure. I don't know. But is it going to be worth it? I mean, I think about Selma and on the bridge. We often forget how, I think 7 or 9 people died being attacked by those dogs. It asks something of us. We cannot sit passively by. We cannot just rest on our privilege, because guess what? Our privilege is also being eroded as we speak. Take Cindy's class. What is my legacy? It'll help you to get a better understanding of history. Talk to each other. Don't talk to me. Whoever wants to be part of a compassionate prayer group, and put it together, folks, and just come tell me it's happening, right? This is where the community needs to step in and step up. And if you're interested in the community justice choir, let me know, right? We'll get a sign-up sheet going and that kind of thing. And then look for where we can be connected in. UCC, the Unitarians, they got this stuff down. And so I'm going to be reaching out to them next week to see where we can partner with them. We don't have to create the wheel, but we do have to be willing, and we do have to say yes. So are you willing to maybe let go of some of the anger and the bitterness and actually transform that into action? Because that's really what I'm inviting us into, right? Can we trust our teachings and move out of the anger and into possibility and into joy and into what could be? That's what we believe. We hold what could be. We hold that vision and we act as it. But if we're not willing to act it, then it just sort of stays as a divine idea. We are the arms, we are the hands and feet, we are the voice, we are how that idea gets made manifest in time and in space. So let's not have those suffragists have suffered in vain. And let's not have those who lost their lives in the civil rights movement have all their suffering have been in vain. We are being called to step up. We're going to try and put this into meditation, but I want to leave you with one final from Ephesians, which I thought was just really beautiful. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander. How many people in here talk smack about quote unquote, right? Along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. So let's take that into our time of meditation. Just breathing into that space where we have the power. It's the season of Lent. It's all about letting go. It's all about releasing. So the invitation is to just, what if we release some of that bitterness and that anger? And what if we allow that to be transformed into possibility, into the activity of our heart, rooted and grounded in love and compassion? That as we model that, as we live that, there is no force that is stronger than that love. Truly, no force is stronger than that love. And so we listen to what's alive within us, the doubts, the fears, the concerns, the worries. It's all good. Make space for them. But I'm going to invite each of us to make a place where those aren't what's driving us. We can acknowledge them, but that we're allowing our values to call us forth. Our values of love, our values of light, our values of compassion and kindness, our values of inclusivity and authenticity, and most of all, our value of connectivity, allowing the oneness that is the very underpinning of what we know and believe to be what guides us forward. There are no enemies. There is no one and nothing against us. For there is no one and nothing that can stand against love. And the more we allow ourselves to be that love, the more the resistance falls away. And as we rest in the silence, I just invite you to allow yourself to sit with what is yours to do. What is yours to do this day? What is calling to you? And just allowing ourselves to listen from that place of possibility and light in the silence. And it is from this space where our nervous system has an opportunity to relax and quiet. Now we can listen to the deepest wisdom, listen to the truest calling of our heart, which is always in support of more love, more joy, more light. Knowing that this unfolding of this calling that is ours and it is the world's, it's all and the same, that it is absolutely unfolding with ease and grace. That there is a flow that is supporting and nurturing us as we stand and support others to know the truth of life itself. In gratitude for this and so much more, I do give thanks. Oh, so much thanks. And in agreement, I invite you to know with me, and so it is. Amen. Ashe. And so our affirmation for today is about releasing bitterness and embracing love and support all around me. Can we know this together, please? On this day of Lent, I release bitterness and embrace the love and support all around me. And so it is. Thank you.